All right, guys, I've got this camera strapped to my head again. We're gonna see how this goes. I'm getting ready to replace this lower control arm here. I've got my phone here in my hand because it's controlling the GoPro that's strapped to my head, and I just look at it once in a while to make sure you can see what I'm seeing, and that's still no guarantee, but I'm trying, guys. What I'm getting ready to do is I'm going to be replacing this lower control arm. I'm going to try and keep this video short, but I don't want to leave anything out. So I'm going to have to do a lot of editing, probably. But this is a used lower control arm. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's fine, or they wouldn't have sold it to me. It came from a legit auto recycler. It's fine. Remember, we ran into a situation with the price that we told the customer. The computer said it was one price and it was 4 or 5 times that. So I was able to find one for the same price that I put on the parts bill. Anyhow, that's the new one, and we're going to be replacing the bent one here. Now, I've already kind of gone through and laid out what tools I need for this job. We're going to be taking this bolt out, and we're going to be pulling that one out. And if you guys can see it, this is the ball joint. That's called a ball joint. That's a ball joint right there. That's it. We're going to be pulling that off, and it's should pretty much come out of there. So here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna pull that and back that nut off of that ball joint. I'm gonna have to grab something to give me a little more leverage here. Yeah. I'll get some leverage on here. There we go. Now I'm sure it's kind of difficult for you guys to see what I'm doing, if you can see it all. There's no power tool I can put on that nut to get it off, because let me show you, because this is the drive axle and there's just not enough room to put anything on there, so I've got to wrench it off. It's a 19 millimeter, so it's a little bit of slow going. I'm going to turn the camera off till I get it, because obviously that'd be boring to watch. I turn the wheel a little bit so you guys can see it a little better. Now I've got her. Now there's that nut. Put all your stuff in a bolt bucket of some sort. Now guys, what we got to do is, let me grab a 2-pound sledge, and I might need 2 of them. Now I'm going to show you something. The ball joint, that nut that I just took off was on this, the ball joint. And can you notice that that's tapered, or meaning it's like a cone? That thing has created a pressed in fit, meaning when that nut was on top of that, it pulled it down. This part here is called the spindle. Okay, that's part of the spindle, or knuckle, either one. That is pressed in there. So even with that nut off, that thing is stuck in there. Now, if you guys have watched, you know, shows on Saturday morning on Speed Channel or Motor Trend TV or whatever it is getting called nowadays, you'll see them use something that looks like a tuning fork, and they'll call it a ball joint fork. and it'll go in there and spread that apart. I don't like to do that. It rips the boot that goes around it. Now granted, we're replacing that, but I don't like doing it. What you're gonna do is you're gonna strike this, and that's made out of cast iron. You're gonna hit this real hard with like a 2-pound sledge. Sometimes you'll have to put another sledge on the other side of it so that it'll shock it loose. And what it is it's causing those, it's actually jarring it loose. Those molecules that we talked about in the metal, like when we're shrinking and stretching and tapping on them with a body hammer that I've mentioned in other videos. Basically, that's what we're doing on a bigger note here. And you definitely never want to hit the top of the ball joint like that, because you'll mushroom the threads out. If I get lucky here, which I probably won't because I'm filming this, it should only take a couple taps. Well, actually taps, I'm gonna have to wail on it, and that thing will pop loose. So we'll see here. Keep your fingers crossed. Let's see if we got her. There it is. See how now it's jumped loose? Okay. That wasn't so bad. Now I'm gonna move on to taking this off. It's a 19 millimeter, and I'm gonna need a 19 millimeter wrench and 19 millimeter socket. This is 1/2-inch drive, guys. And this is a 1/2-inch drive impact. It's the big boy. And okay. I'm gonna put my wrench on top. Let's see how this goes. Live TV, folks, live TV. Okay. Put that in. That came out a little too easy. Okay, now I always put the nut back on top just so I don't lose them, confuse what went where. Now, this front one, I don't think it's 19. I think it's no, it's a 17, I think. All right. Yes, can you see that, guys? I don't know if you see that or not. Let me try and trying to keep this lit up so you can see, but the light's kind of in my way. Now, I'll pull this out of the way. Let's see here. Well, this kind of worries me. Normally, this kind of stuff fights you a little more than that. This is coming right apart, which is, I don't want to complain, but it makes me nervous. All right. There we go. Now, I'm gonna have to get a little bit of a pry bar here. Work that out. Thank you, Licio, organizing the toolbox yesterday. He's great at that. Okay, now, what we're gonna do is put this pry bar in here. Let me get this. Remember where I took that bolt off? That ball joint there's got to pry her down a little bit. There. See, now that's freed up. That's what that lower control arm's holding all that suspension. Okay, now let's go in here. Pry this thing ahead. Okay, now move this light. Okay. Need a pry bar again. All right. There it is. Now you can see how much this thing's bent, I hope. You see that, guys? Pretty obvious. Now, that's a lower control arm. Some of them are set up different. You see how this bolt goes through this way? A lot of arms, this control arm be a shape more like an A. and it'll have a bolt on each side. This one just has one going up from the bottom and one going through. So we're going to put this one back in there. Hopefully it goes back in just as easy as it came out. I'm going to have to slide that in there. Now, this is suspension work. Tap that back. Now, I'm not hitting hard, just tapping enough to get it in place. Now, we gotta get these holes to line up. Gonna get a line up tool. Let's see here. There we go. My phone's sitting there blowing up with emails. See guys, see that hole? We're gonna put this in there. That's what that's for. We're gonna get that. This skirt's right in the way. I'm gonna kind of pry that around. I'm gonna leave that right in there for right now and go get another one. That's why us mechanics and stuff have such big toolboxes. It takes more than one of everything to get the job done. Because a lot of times you gotta have two of the same size wrench, because you have to put one on one side, one on the other. Okay, see how I did that? Now that's pretty good and lined up. Now I'm gonna take my bolt back. Remember, in this case we only had, well, there was another nut, but it's totally different size, but that's why I always put them together. And sometimes I'll do this and it might be a day or two or as much as a week, depending on if I'm waiting on another part, before I can put it back together. Now, I don't know if you can tell or not, but I intentionally didn't knock that nut or that bolt all the way up. This way, let's see, this way, it's easier to get to the top of it to put the nut on. If I had drove that thing all the way up, it would have shoved it up in there and it would have been hard to get the nut on there. So, now that I got it on there, we're going to tighten her up. Actually, before I tighten it up, I'm going to go ahead and put the front bolt in there. In case I have to move it around a little bit. Let's see. Okay. All right, now I'm gonna get this started. I'm gonna get this started by hand so I don't cross thread anything. Cross thread means, you know, kind of stripping the threads out. Okay, there we go. Good and tight. And now switch sockets. Now we're going to come back down here to this ball joint. Take a second to show you something. I just put just a little bit of lube inside of this nut. I don't want to you don't want to spray it on that ball joint, because here's the thing. Remember me telling you about that tapered surface right here? The problem is, if I get lube on this, see that thing spins And if it starts spinning inside that spindle, you can't tighten it up, if that makes any sense to you. So I just put a little bit of lube on the nut itself. I'm gonna turn this camera off and tighten that up with a wrench. Okay guys, I want to take a minute and if you can see, I'm trying to get in here, that let me put this down. If you guys can see, I got I got that nut tight. I don't know if you can see that or not. If you see this contraption I got set up here, well, that's a jack stand. And what I did, I set it up underneath of there, and I let this scissor lift down just enough to put pressure on this. Remember me talking when I was talking about putting lube on that nut? And I said sometimes if you put it on this, it'll run down. Like I said, this thing spins, and as that thing's tapered, well, the problem is this happens sometimes, and it happened this time. The nut would not tighten up. This thing wanted to spin. So I had to put pressure going up on this, the one that's in the car. This is the old one. And the more pressure you put on there, the tighter that gets. So that's why I put that jack stand under there, to make that tighten up. Now once the nut gets down and starts to pull on this, it pulls that taper up into it and it won't spin. So, but that's why that's there. Now, all that being said, this whole 9 yards took me, I don't know, 20 minutes to a half an hour to install that lower control arm. And we do this, obviously that was collision damage that came from an accident. This is the kind of stuff we do in here all the time. I'm going to try not to do hardly any editing to this and keep this thing short. If there's something real long in it, I'm going to cut it out. But the suspension part's done. The wheel should sit in there square now. I didn't see anything else damaged. The next video that I put out is probably going to be replacing these splash shields and all. I'm going to dolly some of this damage out, and that'll be one. And then what I'm going to be doing is, remember when I painted this bumper? We're going to be swapping all the grills and stuff out of this bumper and putting it in there. But anyway, this is going to be the replacement of the lower control arm video. Hope you found something useful in it.